I introduced the next presentation. Now we have, in this case, 3 speakers. First one is Edward Bray, who was a freelance journalist working in different specialist outlets based on EU policy, in particular agriculture, environment, health, and trade, and currently is part of the communication teams in the EFSA. The second speaker, including in this presentation, is Maria Tejero, and who is working at the Department of Communication, Engagement and Cooperation of the EFSA, in particular on animal welfare and animal health, let's say communication topics. And in particular, she's coordinating the EFSA's podcast series, Science on the Menu. And then we have also Maria Dokova in this presentation, who is also part of the EFSA team and working as internal communication specialist, in particular coordinating the recording and post-production of podcast series, including Science on the Menu, which actually is part of the next presentation's topic, who is about novel tools for novel foods, EFSA's Science on the Menu podcast. So I think who's gonna start? I don't know if Maria or Edward. Yeah.
Hi everyone. Yes, indeed, it's not Ed, but it's myself, as you can probably notice. Welcome everyone. I'm very happy to be here to present Science on the Menu, which is the podcast that we have launched at EFSA. Let me just see if everything works at my side in terms of the presentations. Yes, lovely. So I'm wondering whether the audience actually know already our podcast, whether you have had a chance to actually listening to it. I hope so, actually. But if that's not the case, in any case, I would like to welcome you just with the introduction of it.
Science on the Menu, a podcast by the European Food Safety Authority.
Voila, I hope you enjoy it and that you feel now like coming with us to listen a little bit about what is podcasting from a EU institution. First of all, of course, a little moment of self-promotion. You can find us in the Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube Music platforms, of course. But no worries, we will be sharing some links with you later on. And then let's have a taste on Science of the Menu. And the first question really is, why? Why will we engage into doing a podcast? This Parma Summer School is really focusing on innovation. And also my colleague Dolmagoy was mentioning before how much we put into reaching different audiences, explaining what we do. And this is really the aim behind the podcast project. We decided that it was a good chance for us to talk to a different wide audiences, presenting quite complex concepts that we actually work with. It's a very popular tool, as you know. And actually, I was wondering whether any of you do not only listen to podcasts, that I assume is definitely the case for some of you in the audience, but whether actually some of you have also tried to do your own podcast or are planning to. If that's the case, we will be very happy if we get any reaction from your side. If you want to share maybe a link in the chat, that would be very welcome. And of course, any feedback you also have from Science on the Menu in case you are already following us. Anyways, going back to Science on the Menu. So the first question, of course, is why? And then the second question is, was to us, to whom we want to talk, right? Really talking about food safety, you can go from a very, very general messaging to a very, very technical one. And we decided, we had to decide from the very beginning what sort of tone we wanted to give to our podcast. After many considerations, really, also based on the fact that we are doing different campaigns and the data we were getting from our colleagues in the strategic communication team, we decided that we would go for a more general public, but also interested public. So what does it mean? It means anybody out there that has any interest on food safety, not only in Europe, which obviously is in a way our target geographical area, but also worldwide. And you will see a little bit more about that later on. So far we have 10 episodes published and counting. We are working on a number of episodes as we talk. Topics we cover many of them because actually EFSA remit is quite broad, and so it is our catalog for podcast episodes. We have covered so far from novel food, which is the topic we are discussing, to animal welfare or foodborne diseases, for instance. And then another obvious first question is, what would be the language we were talking to? And again, because we were really aiming at reaching a large audience, we decided to go for English. Although, as you know, we are a multilingual reality in Europe, so we would really like to, at some point, try different tools, different options to also publish some episodes in different languages. The duration, we keep it quite short. Sometimes podcasts can get very long, to 1 hour, even more than that, but we really wanted to give tasters of what we have on our menu. And that would be 15 to 25 minutes average, although we have some exceptions. It's not like a set in the stone. Then we have quite a wide team covering the different roles. That was also interesting for us because we didn't have a previous in-house experience. Some of us had had contact with the radio, for instance, on audiovisual work in previous lives, let's say. But we had to find really our own team, and that was a very nice, it's actually still going, very nice work to do. And yeah, challenge is what I just mentioned. We didn't have any presence at EFSA, although there were some other good examples out there of EU agencies or EU institutions doing podcasts. I invite you also to check, for instance, our colleagues ECHA or ECDC ones, in case you are interested on the topics, scientific topics. But yeah, we had to build our own knowledge out of it. Then here you have quite a very general numbers on where we are. Actually, it's not completely accurate in the sense that I should have updated it today, this morning, to get you the latest numbers, because thanks God we see that the podcast is working well and we have listeners and downloads every day. But to give you a little bit of an idea of where we are, you see there, for instance, that the downloads, we have this peaks. You see that in the graphic, and those corresponds really to the moment in which we publish new episodes. So there you see that we have already a number of followers that get notified by the platforms, but also that the promotion we do in social media mostly also works very well. And then this little map there shows you that actually we have audience all around the world. We cannot see, unfortunately, very much in details, but you see that the main audience, all sum up, will come obviously from Europe, but we have quite a consistent audience as well in the Americas, and some people also listening to us from the other continents, which is something that we really appreciate. And voila, without going too much into details, because I would like also my colleagues, Maria and Ed, now to explain you a little bit more on how we do science on the menu. I just wanted to give you a bit of an overall on how we do each of our episodes. We obviously start by planning, thinking, brainstorming what we want to do, what we discuss in terms of topics, who are going to be our potential speakers, etc., and planning all the logistics, which is more challenging than what you would think. Then we go into the production mode, where we draft. We don't actually use a script. We like it to be spontaneous, but we always have some bullet points, some ideas on what we like to discuss around the discussions with the speakers. And then we go to the recording, and there Maria will definitely tell you all about that. She's our magician, we're audio magician, and she knows everything you need to know for that. And then we go into editing again, Maria, working hard here, which is very interesting because you really, and you will see a little bit of that too, it's very interesting seeing how the product evolves from the raw material, let's say, to the final episode. And obviously the end of the process comes when we go to the publication moment, but not only publication, because then promotion starts. And the promotion, actually, we like to do it not only on the day of publication, but also recurrently. We in a way go back to these episodes whenever they are a bit evergreen, let's say, content. So when we think they can work again, we give it another round of visibility to them in our social medias. Having said all that, I will pass the floor to Maria. Yeah, please.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Maria. Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. So as you already mentioned in my part of the presentation, I'll be focusing on the editing and the recording of the actual podcast. So I would really like to take you backstage with me. And if you're considering starting your podcast, or if you've been invited in a podcast, hopefully give you some useful tips and insights. So here on your screens, you could see our very own EFSA studio where we record a podcast. And you could see the main gear, the main equipment that we use, which is, let's say, the essential equipment that you should think of investing in if you want to start a podcast. So the mics, the headphones, you could probably see our recorder there at the back. And we've also invested in a few other additional gadgets, let's say. So the very useful microphone stands, and also the so-called sponges for the mics, which help absorb extra noise and reduce the sibilance. So these are, let's say, really essential things you should think about. Good news is that there's a lot of different equipment out there, a lot of different options. This kind of equipment is becoming more and more accessible and more affordable. So you could really, depending on your budget, depending on the space that you have, can invest in different type of equipment and still get quite decent results. Maybe a word of advice that comes also from our experience, I think, of producing the EFSA podcast. The initial setup of this equipment. So it's not so much about the equipment, but it's also how you use it and how you set it up and how you tune it in. It's not always the most exciting step, I think, of when you think about your podcast, but it's definitely a step that it's worth spending time on, because it can really reduce the amount of time you spend on editing the final product. So yes, definitely something to take into account. So once you've gotten your equipment and once you're all set up, it's really important to think about creating the right environment. And this means I mean this quite literally and also figuratively, the right physical environment and the right just atmosphere when you're recording. So just to give you an example, if you have a space, for example, like our studio at EFSA with a lot of flat surfaces or a lot of glasses which might be reflecting the noise, a very quick tip could be to put some more furniture or rugs or even jackets, which would really help absorb this noise and this reflection. And this was something that was actually done a lot during the pandemic by radio hosts and podcast hosts that would, maybe you've seen some of the pictures of them, having the transmissions from their wardrobes and so on and so forth. So it's really a very affordable tip. Let's see, a rule of thumb is also in terms of whether you are the speaker or the anchor, is to speak straight into the mic at a constant level, normal speaking voice, and have at least 4 fingers difference between yourself and the mic. Of course, this could be difficult to maintain all the time, especially when having a conversation, if you're going for a more conversational type of podcast. But it's still important to know to be mindful of this and try not to move a lot. So, if you, example, if you have a swirly chair, try not to move a lot or move the mic, because this can then make the editor's life very difficult because it changes the audio level. These are, of course, normal things that we all do, especially when there is a bit of nervousness. So that's why it's important to reduce this nervousness and to make maybe yourself and also your guest a bit less fidgety, to have a bit of a warm up. So an icebreaker, just have a natural conversation, maybe not on the topic of the podcast before you jump into the actual recording, to test the equipment and for the speaker and the guest to get the anchor and the guest to get to know each other maybe a bit better. Something that we do for our podcast is, for example, the question, "What did you have for breakfast this morning?" And it's proven to be a good conversation starter. I think it definitely breaks the ice. One final tip that I personally find that is a bit underestimated maybe, is the importance of drinking water or having a glass of water nearby, because it really does reduce a lot of the stickiness that maybe it's a bit exaggerated when you're recording into a mic. So the natural stickiness from your voice, the natural clicks that can be quite bothersome to the listener. But also in general, it's good to stay hydrated and stay fresh. So it can only bring you benefits. Exactly. So following the advice, great. Okay, moving on. So I wanted to share with you very quickly, since I told you that I'm bringing you backstage, a very short outtake from the raw recording of the podcast episode on insects as food. Here you can see Ermolaus, our guest, and our anchor James, just brainstorming a bit. So yes, I'll stop talking and let you listen to the audio.
Yeah, I won't go into that. I don't need to go into that too much detail then about what it looks like.
But if you say cracker, it's
Yeah, I'll do that.
How should we do it? Should we just pull them in 2?
Yeah.
And then you can eat them.
That's one for you and one for Emma.
Okay, so you could hear you heard about a bit of Ed over there as well, who was the episode coordinator. So you could hear it's a lot of there's some dishes clanking. The atmosphere is quite relaxed. There's still brainstorming. This is very raw. So now immediately after, I'll let you listen to the final polished product that we actually use to promote the episode on social media, which is our teaser for the episode. It should be the audio file on the right. Yes.
I think it's only right that we give these a try, Milau. So I'm going to ask you to choose, to pick one of the 3.
I think I will go for a cracker.
Okay, just describe it to the listeners, Milau. So what have you got there?
Well, it's square.
It's square. It looks very much like.
It looks like a regular cracker. I can smell the herbs and the spices. Let me try it.
Okay.
Okay, so here it was. So you could probably tell the difference. A lot more work went into the final, let's say, product, but the important thing for us when producing it was to really still keep this atmosphere. There was a very good atmosphere during the recording. It was a lot of fun to record and to work on. So I think we managed to transmit the original spirit into the final product. But I think who is the person who's best placed to tell you more about the episode and the topic is actually Ed. So I'll be passing the floor to him.
Okay, thanks very much to the 2 Marias for kicking us off. So you heard first about the overall project, the podcast project, what it's about, why we started it, etc. at EFSA, and what we're trying to do with it. You heard about the kind of technical aspects there, the behind the scenes from Maria just now. What I wanted to do now was talk about the episode, the specific episode that we did on novel food, on insect foods. And to do that, I just wanted to make you think a little bit about the background and about what we were thinking about ourselves when making this episode. What were the sensitivities? What might be some of the challenges, and how we would go about that. And the most important place to start in this case was the context. We know that novel foods, and well, insect foods in particular in Europe, are a heated subject. I mean, it's sensitive. There are lots of different reactions, and there are lots of reasons for that. So on this slide, you see a little bit of some of the thinking, the area that we knew that we were going to be diving into when we're tackling this as a topic. The first is the response of the listener, the physical response, the emotional response. In Europe, at least, we know that many consumers, they respond with a kind of what you would describe as the yuck factor would play into how they might respond. So that's, you know, an emotional reaction to what an insect might taste like, a disgust, and that can come. There are many reasons for it. It can come from, you know, a general feeling that we have in Europe about a relationship between insects and disease, various other reasons. So this is one area that we knew would be coming into certain audiences' minds, at least in Europe. Maybe I know that some listeners will come from other places around the world, and we know that in parts of Africa, in Asia, in Thailand, for example, we're not actually talking about a novel food here. We're not talking about something new. We're talking about a product that you see on the market. In Europe, no, it's still niche, it's still novel. The second thing that is probably the most interesting for me, actually, as the coordinator of the episode, is this dichotomy or diverse reactions between neophobia, so fear of the new, which often comes up with innovation. We see it with other innovations in food, lab-grown meat. We see it with the current debate on artificial intelligence, etc., where something so new triggers fears about what it could mean and what it's about. And on the other hand, a very human instinct of curiosity to find out what is it. And I think these are very deep-seated human emotions. One, a fear of the new to keep ourselves safe, because we don't want to get involved with something that could be a risk to us. And the other, curiosity to try something. We may learn something, we may evolve. Was always an evolutionary advantage, actually. You know, making fire, the next step, etc. So I think it's very interesting because we're triggering deep-seated emotions, and when doing the podcast, ideally, we're triggering people's curiosity. We're piquing their curiosity to find out more, to think about it in a different way. And in this sense, I think a podcast is a very good tool, a very good communication tool for tackling very sensitive topics. Why is that? It's because you're listening to real humans talking about the issue. So it's bringing you closer to them. It gives you the space to talk around the issues. So rather than a dry press release, or rather than you know, a simple message, you're able to engage in a conversation, and you're brought in with those people having that conversation. So that's another reason. And you can have a kind of relaxed setting. Maria talked about the fun that we had, and we tried to communicate that through the podcast, that while it might not be something for you, and in fact, it wasn't something for our expert, in fact, who was not so keen actually for the eating moment of trying them, but still it's something that we can engage with on more than just you know, an initial emotional level of disgust or whatever, that we can find out more and be curious. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah. Yeah, so those were two important points that we're thinking of. Two more that we're thinking of is the relevance of food culture in general. We know that it's so important to humans, to us, food tradition. We live, or here in EFSA, we're based in Parma, and many of us live in Parma, and there's probably fewer places that have such a strong food culture and food identity than here. So we are as aware as anyone of how important food is to us. What's on the menu, who are we eating it with, friends, family, etc. And again, having insects on the menu, it triggers a lot of emotional reaction about, is it going against tradition? Is it a threat to tradition? It's again going into an area that is sensitive, provokes a lot of debate, to the extent that we've seen it picked up in politics, with politicians, interestingly, on the right and the left in Europe, using this issue as, you know, a hot stone to raise their concerns about the direction that society is going in. And we needed to be very aware of this. We don't want to go out with a podcast that would stoke the flames, the fire of, you know, of citizen dissent against European institutions. And we've seen that this is the case in some of the debates, that this topic was being used as something to bash the European Union as an institution. Also safety bodies such as EFSA, we've seen, you know, people concerned, etc. So we wanted through the podcast to give people confidence that even if they are not choosing this as a product, and choice is really the important word, because as you heard from Domagoj with EU Choose Safe Food, it's really in the consumer's hands about choosing what food they have, and they can be reassured that it is safe because there is a system in place to do those checks. So we wanted to increase the level of confidence in EU and EU institutions rather than the reverse. That was our goal, but we knew we're going into this space. And finally, we wanted through the podcast to make it clear that EFSA has a very specific role in checking the safety, that whether you like it or not, we can be reassured by our scientists that the products, the insect products themselves, are safe. And it is up to legislators, to the member states, European Commission, to take the big decisions on approvals, authorizations, etc., and the conditions of use. So we didn't want, as a result of this, for people to think, oh, EFSA's in favor of insects, or, you know, EFSA's approved all these insects. No, that's not our role. Our role is checking the safety, and we don't have a view either way. It's not our, we're agnostic. It's not our role to push consumers towards a certain food or not. So really what we wanted to do with the episode was to open the debate, to maybe make people think in different ways than they had before about the topic, where they might be eaten around the world, what happened in history, etc. So that's the context. Hopefully that's made you think a little bit more about what we were thinking about, how we might tackle it. And now I'm going to look at a couple of examples from the podcast itself. So if we can jump, yes. So the first snippet, while Maria gets it ready, you're going to hear from, is a part where we're talking about insects eaten around the world. This was something that I was very keen to get in the episode, to make it clear that in Europe we might have this, we might have our positions, but in other parts of the world they might have different views. And so this is what I wanted to do here. And Emma Lauers, our speaker, our expert, came up with his own original idea, which was very nice, came up, I think, spontaneously, actually, to link it to history, to something that he had found out from reading a famous Greek philosopher you will hear now. And I found that a nice way to sort of detach from the topic and think about it in a broader way.
We're talking about insects today, and you know, for many consumers in Europe, the idea, it takes some getting used to, let's say, but outside of the EU, we know that insects are a very important part of many diets in different geographies across the world.
Indeed, James, as you have correctly pointed out, insects, some species of insects, have been part of the diet of different populations around the globe, up to a different degree and consumed under different occasions. As you have said, for us here in Europe, it's something new. By legislation, it is insects and their products are novel food, so we have to assess their safety before they may end up in the European market. But also we have to keep in mind that all these things, have changed throughout our history. Aristotle, back in ancient Greece, in one of his books, it's called History of Animals, he described different animal species, how they look like, what they do, all these kind of aspects. And he described some insects, and in the description of these insects, he was saying how taste changed from the females to males, and actually saying which one tastes better. And this automatically means that somebody back in ancient Greece used to consume insects. However, we don't know how much, who, under which occasions. But it's something that agrees exactly with what you said. Our dietary patterns, they change, they evolve, they include or exclude different food items.
Yeah. I find it, like I said, I find it fascinating. Presumably, I mean, you're a Greek man yourself. Presumably, they're not eating insects. It's not widespread.
We'll stop it there. I think you got the taste there for. I think you got the taste there for what we were trying to do. It was very nice that Maria popped some music over the top of that. It kind of took you to a different space. And as I said, it was a nice spontaneous idea from Emma Laus to take this back into ancient history, actually, to make us reflect that what we know now as staple diets, it's not always been that way. And in fact, he mentioned to us that in Italy, of course, at a certain point, there wasn't the tomato, the potatoes weren't here, they came from outside. And often that's a surprise to consumers when the current staples of certain diets actually change over time, and what we know as a traditional food may not go back as far, actually, sometimes as we thought, or there may be things that are relatively new but have become very traditional in diets. So this was one thing that we wanted to do to widen the debate in this way. The second clip we're going to hear now, you heard a little part of it already, was where we decided, okay, let's put this into practice. Let's live while doing our podcast, let's taste something and let's see how we react. We thought that would be fun. It was fun. It was interesting. I'd never tried an insect food before, so I went online. I bought some various types. We put them in front and we saw what would happen. So it gave a sense of spontaneity to the listener, but also would hopefully make them reflect a bit on what it would be like actually trying them. What would they taste like? And so you're going to hear a little clip now from the final part, which includes me actually, as a special guest brought in to do this. So if you manage, Maria, to take it to the tasting part at the end, and then you can hear how we did this. And my thinking also was that there would be a bit of sound involved with the crunching of the insects, the rustling of packets, so that would bring it a bit more to life for a listener, and they would be with us imagining what it was like to taste these things.
Our listeners a surprise, and this will come as a surprise to you as well, probably, Emma Laus. I'm looking now beyond the studio to Ed. I'm going to beckon you into the studio. Ed, please. Ed is a colleague of ours from the communications team. Now, Ed, you've brought something with you. Tell us what you've got here.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Ed.
I've got here a few things to try. These here are house crickets in turmeric. We have some grasshoppers, pepper, so these are whole. And here are some crackers, and they are with the flour of crickets as well as rosemary and thyme.
Okay, so these are all products that you've brought Well, you bought,
not from a supermarket, but online directly from a producer.
and I think it's only right that we give these a try, Malau. So I'm going to ask you to choose, to pick one of the three.
I think I will go for a cracker.
Okay, just describe it to the listeners at Malau. So what have you got there?
Well, it's square.
It's square. It looks very much like
It looks like a regular cracker. I can smell the herbs and the spices. Let me try it.
Okay. Wow, that sounds crunchy.
It's quite crunchy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel the herbs.
Okay, you taste the herbs. Yeah. Okay, we should say. I mean, it comes in a packet that looks like a packet of crisps. Let's say. Okay, so I've got a cricket here in my hand. Yeah, it's hard to describe. I mean, if you look very closely, you can see clearly that it's as an insect. It's dried, and it's got a sort of coating, a powdery coating on it, which I presume is the turmeric.
It's quite orange.
Yeah, so it's quite orange. So I'm going to give that a go.
That leaves then the grasshopper.
It does indeed.
They're considerably bigger than the crickets. I would say these must be maybe a couple of centimeters long.
Yeah.
And it says to remove the wings. I'm looking at Emolaus.
Yes, you did well, because in cases to have big insects, it's better to remove wings and legs, because they can be hazards when when you consume it.
As a choking hazard, or
yeah.
Okay.
Well, let's try this. Very peppery. That's the spice that it comes with.
Yeah.
To be honest, I wouldn't have expected you were so adventurous. Like myself, I don't know. I cannot. It's difficult for me to consume an insect in a visible form, like whole as it is. Okay, for me, like a cracker, when I don't see it, it's not a big deal. But whole insect, no. And actually, there are quite some studies on the acceptance of edible insects by consumers, also in Western countries. And the outcome of the studies, it points towards the direction that edible insects may have higher acceptance when they are not in a visible form.
Yeah.
Like, for example, they are included in a foodstuff in the form of powder.
Yeah, which is what you had with your crackers there. Well, we'll have to see what happens with insects. Ultimately, as you say, that's in the hands and mouths of the consumers.
Okay, I think you literally got a taste there for what that was like at the end, where we were putting it into practice, and I think that was quite a fun way to try them. And perhaps it triggered you with some of these emotions when he was talking about pulling the legs off the grasshopper and the wings, which was required for me to eat it. I think it was an interesting experience also to get firsthand the reaction of colleagues, which could be anyone, what they felt like doing it. And you could see that Emolaus had an initial reaction that he was not so keen to try a whole form of an insect. He said that he didn't like shrimps when he was younger, and it made him feel the same. You could say that James and I were a bit more adventurous. But speaking firsthand, as someone who hadn't tried them before, it was an interesting experience. Also, out of curiosity, it piqued my curiosity to try. I took them home. My kids finished them off. They were happy to try. So I think this whole experience that we had about putting the episode together, it was also a good opportunity to try things out, be innovative in the way that we were doing it. And that's what we are going to try to continue to do with our podcast format and the podcast itself, to look for new ways to engage a listener, etc. We're relatively new to it. There are other EU agencies who have been doing it for longer. And as an EU body, it's not always the easiest to get into a market where we know there are so many podcasts out there. We're competing for ears and for the space. but we want to come up with a product which is our own, which is unique, and hopefully there will be an audience that we can reach beyond our usual stakeholders and close close community, to reaching people, and in this case, for example, reaching people and maybe make them think in a new way about the topic and about EFSA itself as well. Maybe they would come to us with a more friendly or more open approach, having seen that we are human, we have human emotions, we respond also just as everyone else does to this topic, to the issue of novelty in food. And I should mention also that this was the first episode that we did on novel foods, and came out actually at a very interesting, sensitive time where it was a lot in the media. There were statements being made a lot by
Should I intervene?
Yeah, I'm back. You lost me for a moment, but I'm back. Okay, hello, can you hear me? Okay. I'll have to regain my thread where I was. I think I was talking about the moment when we put this episode out, which was an interesting moment because there was a lot going on politically in Europe. There was a lot of reaction. We'd even seen, for example, Russia come into this debate about insects in Europe and was pushing a narrative somehow that this was an example of Europe's decadence, or a kind of negative narrative. So we were aware of this, and in some small way, we were hoping to open minds. And since we've done this episode, we've produced now a further episode on novel food, this one talking about another issue, which is again very topical and triggers some of the same reactions to this, on lab-grown food. We say cell culture derived food at EFSA. Looking at meat and speaking with one of our experts who deals with this topic. So again, some of the same kind of questions came up as to how we would deal with this. And we looked at it in a similar way. How could we pique people's curiosity beyond the initial reactions that might be triggered? So I hope this has given you all who are listening an insight into our project, the episodes. Hopefully it's piqued your curiosity now to listen to the whole episode. We gave you some tasters there. Hopefully you gained also some tips about thinking about podcasting and what needs to happen for it to be successful. And I'm not able to see how you react and how many of you maybe have podcasts yourselves or are communicating in this way. But I know for many researchers now, there is a lot of interest in communicating on their research, ongoing research in this way, as a way to reach out, to the wider public and reach other people. And there are a few better ways to do this on a very personal level than a podcast, which is probably the most personal of all the medium. That's what people say, and I think it's true.